Add excitement to your holidays with Ohio Lottery Holiday Scratch-Offs, including $1 holiday cash and $5 holiday lucky times 10, or Holiday Bonus Millions with a 200 times multiplier and a $2 million top prize. Plus, enjoy second chance drawings where you can win 10 times, 100 times, or 1,000 times the price of your ticket. Scratch-offs make the perfect gift, and best of all, there's no wrapping required. Lottery players are subject to Ohio laws and commission regulations. Play responsibly.
Welcome to Mind Love Premium, episode 76. Today's episode is all about giving power to peace.
If we're living in a balanced society, and if we're more toward the golden age than the age that we're in, the natural way things are supposed to work, at puberty, we should be activating the Kundalini simultaneously. What we're seeing is that people go through puberty, and until something almost traumatic happens in their life, or there's someone like me that consciously pursues the disciplines of the mystical arts to purposely activate the Kundalini and take it to the side. For the most part, people 50, 60 years old and maybe saw a car wreck right in front of them.
If you're new to Mind Love, don't forget to subscribe because first of all, the button is super cute and you know you want to touch it. But most of all, you are going to want to be notified about new episodes. Giving your mind a little love is a habit that can help you think better, do better, and feel better. So hit subscribe, just to see how it feels. Did you know that most people think 80 to 90% of the same thoughts today that they thought yesterday? And did you know that most people think the same thoughts today that they thought a year ago? And that a high percentage of those thoughts are the same thoughts they had 5 to 10 years ago. That means that a huge portion of our thoughts aren't even evolving. At first, it seems kind of hard to believe. Our lives change a lot in a 5 to 10 year span. So how can we be thinking about the same things? But if you really think about it, it makes sense. You stay in a job that you hate too long, so you're constantly thinking about your terrible boss or when you're going to leave. You stay in a relationship too long, so you're constantly thinking about all of the things that your partner does wrong. You tell yourself for the 1,000th time, tomorrow I'll quit drinking. You have an idea for a business you could start, but year after year, it remains just a thought. You screwed that thing up when you were 22, and 10 years later, you still think, what could have been if only? And all the thoughts in between may not always be exactly the same, but the energy of them is. You get used to seeing everything that's wrong with your house, or your partner, or your job. You make a habit of thinking the risk of change is too big, or that you don't deserve that thing that you want. Or your ideal life is not possible for you. Thoughts are habits. Thoughts at one level of energy bring in more thoughts of the same energy, which is why when you're in a bad mood, everything around you seems terrible. When you're in a bad mood, the things around you are the same as they've always been. Most of the time, reality is neutral. It's our thoughts about reality that cause our suffering. Which is also why whatever you're wishing or holding on to that you think is going to come fix your life, it probably isn't. We think, if only I won the lottery, if only I got that promotion, if only my kids were a little bit older, if only I lived somewhere else, then I'd be happy. But then you make more money, or you move cities, or your kids grow up, and you just see the next thing wrong in your world. Most people don't know how to let their thoughts pass. They dwell on them or ruminate, and they give more power to the problems that don't even exist. And I know some people have much harder lives than others. But I also know that our thoughts cause us more suffering than our circumstances over the course of our lives. We mull over our past, and we worry about the future, or we wish things could be different, but we don't do anything about it because we're stuck in the mental loop that we keep playing over and over again. And that's when our lives are easy. And when things are hard for us, we make our lives even harder by the way we choose to think about it. So today we're talking about giving power to peace. Our guest is Master Lama Rasaji, who is one of the 12 Master Lamas in the world. He has been training in Lao Tzu's regenerative health system for more than 50 years and has been teaching for over 40 years. His daily videos speak on energy enhancement, being the change in the world, the breath of life, and so much more. And all of his teachings are passed down knowledge from over 10,000 years ago and are designed to assist people to live an abundant life in every area: health, finances, relationships, and service to the world. So 3 key things we will learn are the 2 basic purposes humans are called to fulfill, how the chi relates to the physical body, and why we should do the opposite of what most people are doing. Before we go deep today, I want to give you a little gift, and I want to give it to you every single day. It's called the Morning Mind Love. I know how life can be. You're all fired up after an inspiring episode, and then a new day or a new challenge comes at you, and it's just hard to keep up that energy. Well, the Morning Mind Love is kind of like an oracle from your higher self to help you start each day with a positive focus. Plus, when you sign up, you get 2 free gifts: a 30-minute binaural meditation and 30 days of journaling prompts to help you remember who you truly are. And it's all completely free. So join over 9,000 people and go to mindlove.com to sign up, or text the word morning to 33777. And now let's welcome Master Lama Rasaji to the show.
Well, thank you for having me, Melissa. It's fun to be with you.
So I am curious, what led you from the country down your spiritual path?
Well, people ask that because they hear that Tennessee twang in my voice, right? So I've been all over the world, but it kind of stayed with me a lot. I was a very sickly baby, and bouts of pneumonia from the time I was 2 and 3 years old. And then when my family relocated in North Florida from the dry climate of Nashville to the humid climate of North Florida, my illnesses kind of changed to more kidney urinary tract. So one day I was swimming in a swimming pool, and it felt like somebody stuck a knife in my abdomen, and I actually was a good swimmer, but I literally started drowning in the middle of the swimming pool because the pain was so bad. And the coach was probably about this big around, probably hadn't swum in several years, and he jumped in after me, and they took me and examined me and found out that I had some major urinary tract problems. One of the things was happening is the valves between the urethra and the bladder were not completely opening and closing correctly. So after experimenting with drugs and stuff for about a year and a half, they finally decided, well, he needs some major surgery. So during the surgery, my body stopped functioning a couple times, and I was conscious of leaving my body shortly after the anesthesia was actually given to the body. And I had fun. And as a matter of fact, I met the Lama Master first time out of the body, and during that surgery in 1968, and had no idea who he was, but I had seen him a couple times in my dreams and in meditation. And I met some people that I was going to meet later in my life, kind of introduced me to people that would show up physically. And so that's how that all got started. After I got feeling better, my dad enrolled me in martial arts, about 13 years old. At that time, I was sleeping about 12 to 13 hours a day. I'm sure I would have been diagnosed with chronic fatigue syndrome. I had lost a good portion of both kidneys, and my adrenal glands were completely shot. So I had no get up and go. Today at 65, I have more get up and go than probably the average 18-year-old. So not only that, because of the help of Ayurveda masters and some Tibetan monks, I regenerated kidneys, and I have adrenal energy today to burn, basically. People laugh about me. My 12-year-old tries to keep up with me, and I just enjoy life. But that's what led me into the martial arts. My dad read this magazine. In the 60s, Look magazine was, Look and Life magazines were important. I forget which one it was, but he read it, that get your kids into martial arts and yoga, it'll build stamina. So I actually started doing both. I started doing yoga and martial arts. But I was so tired Melissa, in the beginning, I had to do half of my martial art class in a chair because I didn't have the energy. One day, this martial art master walks out with a jug about that big and a root in it about that big. It was a 100-year-old ginseng root. And he told my dad, he said, that'll cost you $300. Well, $300 in 1969 was a lot of money. And especially my dad, I remember him shaking his hand, reaching in and getting those 3 Benjamins out. And but this was his son. And, the doctors had already told my mom and dad that I'd be in and out of the hospital my whole life, and I would be lucky if I saw my 18th birthday, which is I turned right after graduation in 1974. And because I went what they call that alternative path, right? I kind of laugh about the alternative path because all the background and study I've done over the years with Ayurveda masters and Tibetan lamas, well, what they call alternative path, been around over 10,000 years, and what they call today medicine has only been around for 300 or 400 years. And so which one are you going to turn to? And when the modern world gave up on the Lama, fortunately, my family and masters didn't give up on me and turned that corner years ago. It took me to New York City in 1975, and it was there that I really had a major deja vu experience because I actually saw the guy in physical form that I saw out of the body 7 years before. That changed everything. It took me about 6 months to actually make that connection. And when I did, he came to me one day and he said, I got some good news and I got some bad news. And I told him, I said, look, I'm born the Chinese sign of the monkey and we're into adversity. He said, go ahead and tell me the bad news first. So he says, well, my visa's up and I've got to go back to Tibet. And I said, well, then tell me what the good news is, because that's some real bad news.
What, you guys got married? Just kidding.
No, the good news was he wanted to take me with him to Tibet. And that's how I got to Tibet. And then I ended up 3.5 years in the Lamasery there and learned how to pick herbs and, learned how to do Tai Chi Gong. And as much as I like to talk now, the whole first year I wasn't allowed to talk. That was quite challenging for me. People ask me what kind of Lama you are. And I said, just imagine Forrest Gump going Lama and you'll have a good idea what kind of Lama I am. So.
I would have died the first day of not being able to speak. I built my whole life around being able to speak. I know that a central part of your message and your teachings come back to the idea of the circle of life. What does that mean to you?
Well, it means a lot of things, really. I mean, it's the title of the first book that we have, but one thing that it means, when you talk to an acupuncture physician, they'll say that the 2 meridians that develop first within inside of expectant mother is the governing meridian, which goes up the spinal cord, then the conceptional meridian, which comes down the front of the body. So in one sense, that's your circle of life. We called it the fetus meditation in the ancient Lamasery. Today they use terminology like microcosmic orbit and things of this nature. That was kind of coined a phrase by a Qigong master by the name of Montauk Chia in New York several years ago. But circle of life, I remember I'd been home for a while and they decided, I wanted you to go around and investigate 10, 12 different cultures have to do with health and longevity. So I started going to investigate the Hunzas and some of the people in Mexico and came up with a common denominator of what was driving health and longevity in a natural spiritual life. And out of that became the Circle of Life book that we wrote, which people, if they go to our website, basically for just giving us their email, they can join our site and they get that book downloaded for free. And it's basically how the mind, what's the relation between the mind and energy? What's the relation between breathing and energy? What's the relation between movement and energy? And what about nutrition? And we teach in the Lama series, there's 3 degrees of nutrition. There's DNA nutrition, there's psychic nutrition, and there's spiritual nutrition, and you want to activate nutrition on all levels. And it's amazing the moment that somebody starts to activate psychic and spiritual, they find out, I don't need so much, physical nutrition as I thought I did before, right? And so that changes a lot of things when people do that. And with me, it was activating those two forms of nutrition that changed everything. And so I realized today that, we all have an energy body. Some people call it the auric field, and this energy body feeds this physical body. And as long as that relationship is strong, the body was designed to go on much, much longer than most of people today realize. So that's what we do. And, we help people try to focus on health. We say on our website, it's health, wealth, and happiness for one human family. And that's been the mission statement of the Lamasery for over 1,000 years. And so that's where we focus most of our energy.
Yeah, I was reading your book, and there's so many fascinating parts in it. And one of the sections was talking about how humans are called to fulfill two basic functions. They are intended to pursue self-development, and they're intended to work like angelic beings behind the scenes, sharing what they've learned. Can you just elaborate on that a little bit more?
Well, sure. I mean, part of that comes from me being in contact with angels and nature spirits since I was a childhood. And I thought that was an everyday thing. And of course, after getting a few doors slammed in my face as a teenager at 16 and 17 years old, I kind of realized that wasn't as natural to a lot of people as I thought. But everybody's put here with a mission in life that comes from them in spirit. And it's the fulfillment of that mission. People a lot of times talk about passion, and my true meaning of compassion is communicating that passion to everyone else. In other words, I can sit on a mountaintop, I can meditate and stare at my navel and eat alfalfa sprouts and get all kind of knowledge, but can I really share that knowledge with other people, and what benefit is this knowledge for people? So a lot of times people will talk about the fruits of their labor, and you could go to Rasaji.com and read hundreds of testimonies about fruits of the labor. We say in the Lamasery, probably the most powerful thing is to ask students that's adapted to our system, what is the fruits of their labor? Because that's the real proof in the pudding, right? So when you look at things, people are really sent here for a real purpose. And that purpose is nothing short of being angelic when you think about it. I mean, all of us are called to some form of holiness if I wanted to be religious, right? So the key of it is that we're here, and you look how the Lamasery and the Lamas have been working in humanity for 3,000 years. And two basic functions were to standardize the exercise and make sure the way they're being taught, the stances, the movement, the breathing, the mental focus in the exercises have been passed down from master to student in an unbroken line for 3,000 years. The other function is, what can we do to help somebody? In other words, that body might be one person, but a lot of times it's been a not-for-profit organization. A lot of times it's been counseling some government figure. We've been into everything. There's 36 of us at any given time, Melissa, that are active. Now, that being said, there's about that many that most people would call retired. They're not really retired. They're retired from what they used to do when they were active. But we might have a Lama that focuses on the weather in a certain part of the world, trying to create that balance with energy. There might be two political people meeting in a country, and a retired Lama is liable to go to a hotel room across from that and just sit there and send energy into that meeting, hoping and praying that that meeting goes in a positive way to have impact on humanity. I mean, there's been a lot of that. I remember that happened when Reagan and Gorbachev were meeting in Helsinki is a good example, and everybody knows what happened to the outcome after that. Shortly after that, the walls in Germany came tumbling down. I remember I was on one of my trips in India and training in some of the ashrams in India, learning the 3 yoga disciplines that are the pillars of our system. And I'll never forget some of the German people coming in. They were so excited. Talking about passion. Oh my God. Smell freedom when you've never tasted it before. And all of a sudden, there were 7 or 8 German people, girls and guys that were they were on cloud 9. You would have thought that it was Christmas all year round to these guys. It was a beautiful thing to experience.
So you had mentioned basically energy and how it relates to the physical body and how our energy is nutrients for the physical body. How do you teach that to people? How do you teach them to basically boost nutrients that they aren't? Because most people consider, when they hear the word nutrients or nutrition, they think solely of food, but there's so many other levels of nutrition for the body. So what are those, and how do we start to increase that source of energy for ourselves?
Is it time to reimagine your future? The right business skills may make a difference in your career. At Capella University, we offer a relevant education that's designed to focus on what you need to know in the business world. We'll teach professional skills to help you pursue your goals, like business management, strategic planning, and effective communication. And you can apply these skills right away. A different future is closer than you think with Capella University. Learn more at capella.edu.
How do you start to increase that source of energy for ourselves?
Yeah, nature's finer forces, if you will. This was a discovery of the original Lama. So Boganathar, people can Google Boganathar, and they could also Google Lao Tzu. What people might not know and probably can't find a lot of information on is that they were one and the same individual. A lot of people thinking Lao Tzu was this Chinese philosopher that was born like most Chinese in mainland China, that was fair-skinned, and he was raised there, and that's where he learned there, and that's where he taught there. The reality is this gentleman was born Brahmin with a very dark complexion, copper skin, and he was this great yoga master of 3 disciplines. And one was Hatha yoga, as we know, stretching and conditioning yoga, which is the root of almost all physical yogas today. Then it was pranayama yoga, learn to breathe not only oxygen, but to learn to breathe energy. And then the third was kundalini, which was energy yoga of the chakras itself. Well, he was looking around, and he had mastered those 3 disciplines, but when he was looking around at the different masters, at that time, 3,300 years ago, he didn't really see anybody that was interested in keeping the body around. And he thought that was really weird. If God's God, God should be the same God in 3D as he is in 4D and 5D, and why aren't y'all taking more responsibility for your physical vehicle? So he began to have these visions, and one day there were some of these wandering sadhus, wandering Indian monks, who began to talk to him. And he says, you know what? Sounds like what you're seeing in your visions and dreams sounds like mainland China. So he one day decides he's going to trek from India to China, and that's where he goes. So imagine, Melissa, 3,300 years ago, you're in China, no industry, the water flowing out of a mountain so pure you can stick a glass in there and drink it. This guy decides to take his yoga to the virgin forests of China over 3,000 years ago. What he discovered is he sat by the riverbank of the Yangtze River one day, and he began to do his yoga asanas and his postures. Certain things would happen, of course, to the energy. But as he began to shift from one yoga posture to the other, the transition of the shifting of weight from one to the other was doing something totally different to the energy. Another thing he realized, depending on what part of nature he was in, the energy was feeding his body a different way. So if I was by the water, then he was surrounded by water chi. But when he went in the mountains, it was a totally different kind of chi. And then when he went in the forest and he got around trees that were over 1,000 years old, he realized, oh my God, I'm being fed totally different. So one day he realized, he said, you know what, I have left the gurus of India and surrendered myself to Mother Nature. And I'm going to discover in nature what the human race forgot. And so he made Mother Nature and the spirit of Mother Nature his guru for the next 5 decades. And he spent 5 or 10 years in the different elements of nature. One day, he's got this beard X numbered this way. And understand that this was a pretty tall individual, well over 6 foot tall. And by the time a general from the emperor's Middle Kingdom discovered him, he looked like some raggedy hermit, obviously out in nature for 50 years. And, bathing was in the river and this and that. And so they decided that one day they approached him, and the general was very advanced martial artist. So he was aware of energy. And as he got close to this hermit, he noticed that his aura and energy body was humongous. He'd never seen an energy body like that. It was somewhere 20 or 30 feet in diameter around the being. And he says, you're a holy man, right? He said, you must be a holy man. He said the emperor of the Middle Kingdom, Emperor Qin, said he's dying of what sounded like a neuromuscular disease, something like palsy or something like MS. And the herbal doctors in the palace were only giving him so many years to, would you please come? So he came, they took him, they cleaned him up, cut his hair, put him in the traditional ponytail, put on Chinese garments, everything. And he came up to the emperor to meet the emperor. It was a couple months after working with the emperor, teaching him about herbs, teaching him about energy, about nutrition on 3 different levels, which he had learned, that the emperor started getting better and stronger. And the emperor became his first unofficial student. And it was there that he gave him the name of Lao Tzu. And the joke of it was he loved the discipline of sweeping up. And so somebody would come by him and they would say, old man, what are you doing here? And he said, I'm just here to clean up. I'm just here sweeping up. I came to the earth just to clean up. And so that was his connection. But later, and that's why out of that was the second thing I was talking about, the stabilizing of the exercises over here, but mentoring and supporting people over here. And that has become the bulk of what a Lama basically has done over the years. And we're still doing it today, 3,000 years later.
Yeah, I know one of the discoveries you mentioned was that an individual can actually expand his or her energy field to surround another human being to protect or heal them. And I know that in a number of different faiths, that's maybe where the idea of praying for someone comes from. I know in things like Reiki or energy healing, you can hold this intention. But I'm curious too, how does that work exactly? And does the first individual that has this intention to do this, to expand their energy field, do they need to have enough of their own chi or source energy to be able to do that? Can anyone do that?
Yes. No, it's a great question. It's a great question, Melissa. And the simple answer is yes. To a certain extent, everybody can do that. Now, and then the other things you said were also true. So whether I'm talking about baptismal in a church that was originally designed to activate the Kundalini that Master Rabbi Jesus, which is how we refer to him in the Lamasery, It was to stimulate what he considered second birth. He said you can be born of a woman of water, but you need to be born of the Father of the holy fire. So he signified, there's two births going on. And he said that was a spiritual birth that happened. And actually we have tied together is that the Kundalini experience is actually this experience that he talked about. So there's a lot of ways that people can initiate the Kundalini experience. And one of the most popular in the ancient Siddha Yoga tradition, of which our system flows down from, was this concept of the Shakti pot. And that is the transmittal that you're talking about of energy of one human being to another. It's very much like I'd like to relate like somebody's battery is kind of low and they need a jump start. So that's what happens. It can happen long distance. It's particularly happening usually more closer range. We make the case that the church makes a big deal about Christ's birth. They should. It was purposeful. They make a bigger deal about the crucifixion. It was purposeful. The Lamasery makes the biggest deal about what happened the 40 days after the rock rolled away. We say that Christ's truest teachings, that he stayed around to demonstrate what second birth looks like if you get completely all the way on the other side. In other words, the Kundalini experience is completed. With most people, they're not even aware of what's really happening when the Kundalini sets into motion. I was about 14 or 15 years old when the Kundalini got activated in me. And as it moved through me from times, I would get nausea at times. Sometimes I would literally physically kind of pass out. But after I came under the care of the Lamas, then through our system, I learned to balance that and complete that cycle. With the average person, that's a 30 to 40 year cycle with most people. And unfortunately, when the Kundalini activates, a lot of people today are suffering because of Kundalini imbalance that the Western medical field doesn't know anything about. And a few people in integrative medicine understand that. There's some people like at Mayo Clinic that are doing enough research on that. And the key of it is that, again, you can develop your energy enough. See, let's take the opposite of what you say. Let's look at a person who would be considered imbalanced or ill, physically ill. There's a good chance when you examine their energy field that their energy body has actually done the opposite. It's contracted. It's not, if I'm pretty healthy, on an average, that energy body should extend 7 feet from my sternum in all directions. So it should go 7 feet this way, this way, this way. If I'm able to see that energy field spinning around a physical person, it will look like a giant atom around the body in all different kind of beautiful colors, like a Milky Way galaxy, almost like a quasar. And that energy spins this way, that way, and every which way. Now, when somebody's ill or sick or imbalanced, that it's not 7. They're lucky if it's 4 to 5 feet. Not only that, your chakras, which are as large as, if I'm on a big sailboat and I've got the steering wheel in a sailboat, those are about the size of an average chakra. That's about how big somebody's average chakra is. And we have the spokes, which are nadas. The Sanskrit for spokes is nadas. And when people are born, we have 72,000 of those nadas. About half of them are turned out and half of them are turned in. And then we hit puberty. And the moment we hit puberty, more of the nadas start to turn out. Now, if enough of the nadas turn out, person will actually go into automatically the second birth concept that Jesus was talking about, or what in India they would say they're going to activate their Kundalini. Now, when that happens, then your endocrine gland system, which got activated in your body, is like your physical chakras. Your nadas and your chakras are like your psychic endocrine gland system. Now all of a sudden, and by the way, Melissa, if we're living in a balanced society, and if we're more toward the golden age than the age that we're in, the natural way things are supposed to work, at puberty, we should be activating the Kundalini simultaneously. What we're seeing is that people go through puberty, and until something almost traumatic happens in their life, or there's someone like me that consciously pursues the disciplines of the mystical arts to purposely activate the Kundalini and take it to the side. For the most part, people 50, 60 years old and maybe saw a car wreck right in front of them. Maybe they were in the war, in PTSD, seeing some friends taken out. Things like this, trauma can actually activate Kundalini. Because why? The nadas, the spokes again that turn out, physically, they're totally connected to the central nervous system. So that's their response. And as I said before, the chakras are influenced in the endocrine gland system. When I'm going through second birth, let's say that I got 75 to 80% through my Kundalini experience. This is what normally happens. Now my energy body has gone from 7 to more like 12 feet in all directions. Now, the meridians of acupuncture, instead of them just deeply bedded in my physical body, they're expanding beyond the physical body now, and they're feeling the energy body like a membrane. So if I took, I'm living in Florida, right? And so I took a nice Florida orange and I peeled the orange off, and I'm looking at the inside. I see a membrane all around the orange, right? The similar membrane that is now to a person that's more like a master, and it's encompassing. And this is what the general felt because he approached Boganathar, and it was 20 to 30 feet around. I mean, because you had an individual between the Siddha Yoga disciplines before he left India, and now 50 years in nature perfecting that. It's not unheard of to see a master who had a field 20, 30 feet. And so we go back to scripture, and people were talked about just touching the hem of Jesus's garment and getting healed. Well, there you are. There you are. And if you want to see a really interesting story, know more about that, there's a show I do every week with Jimmy Swin called The Patriot and the Lama Show. That's also on Rasaji.com. People are interesting. They should tap into episode 21, which was the lost journey of Jesus, and they will actually see the 12 to 14 years that nobody talks about in the Bible, what really happened to Jesus, and then all of a sudden the pieces of the puzzle will make sense.
I actually went on a deep dive this last year because I was raised Christian, and then I no longer aligned with a lot of the beliefs that my family kept with. And there was just something missing for me. And so I started to pursue, first I was like, there's no God at all in my early 20s. And then as would have it, I mean, that was kind of activated by trauma for me. And I sat in that trauma for a while, and my climb out of it was really the path of a broader spirituality that made more sense to me. But I've still kind of held certain beliefs and gone back and forth. And so I decided this last year to kind of dive into an alternate view than what I was raised with on the teachings of Jesus, and found different books like When God Had a Wife, and just really amazing things and evidence of Jesus's life in that in-between part. So I'll make sure I find that episode that you're talking about and link to that for listeners who are interested in. But we're talking a lot about imbalances, and from what I gathered from what you said, it seems like this Kundalini energy should be activating naturally, but it's not for most people. It takes a trauma. And one of the things that you say in your book is that males on the planet right now are having trouble with their solar plexus, and females are having difficulty with their throat centers. So where are these imbalances coming from? Why are we disconnected from that natural Kundalini energy that should be activating? So where are these imbalances coming from? Why are we disconnected from that natural Kundalini energy that should be activating?
Well, because we've been taught in society to constantly look outside ourselves. And when you examine how many women have you come across in the last, let's say, decade that you knew that had a thyroid issue? It's very common. Either underactive, over. How many men do you know are diabetic, or they have ulcers in their stomach, or pancreas imbalances from sugar imbalances? Well, let's look at those two centers metaphysically for a second. So we know we got thyroids in the throat, we got the pancreas in the stomach and the solar plex. Well, those are the physical issues. There's also psychic and spiritual issues with those centers. See, the descending energy, the golden energy, comes naturally down through the crown chakra. Its natural outlet is through the belly. It's referred to as the self-realization center. A lot of guys today, they've incarnated so many times as a warrior, whether they're fighting in the corporate world or they're fighting on the battlefield, they're tired of fighting. But yet, in order for the masculinity of them to expel, that is a natural flow of energy, right? Well, if I don't really want to be here or don't want to be in my body, can you imagine the energy blockages that are being formed to block that natural ray, right? Look at the throat chakra. Energy comes up from Mother Earth, shoots straight up through the body. Where does it want to come out? Let's come out the throat chakra. Well, what does that energy signify? Creativity, authority. So we see a lot of women today waking up to their creativity, to their authority. We're going to see hundreds of thousands, millions more wake up in the next couple of years, right? They're not walking behind some guy in like some Middle Eastern country, right? That day has changed. It's been changing. Actually, you can make a case. So the city yoga masters, when we read the Christian Bible, it says, oh, God created, creation in a 7-day period. But does people know what a day and a night of God is to a city yoga master? Well, a day is about 12,000 years and a night's another 12,000 years. So now, are we talking about 7 days, or are we talking 7 times 24,000? And when you do 7, actually when you do about 6.5 times, we're talking now realistically about how long we actually been here as humans, right? People talk about the birth of Adam as if Adam happened 5 to 7,000 years ago. According to Lamasery, it's more like 175,000 years ago. And it all correlates with a day and night of God based on what the City Yoga roots, you can take back 50,000 years. But they've been getting together, and every 12 years they have this special festival. It's been going on for over 50,000 years. Can you imagine a festival going on for over 50,000 years called the Kubala Mela? And that's where these fakirs, skin and bones, that maybe were meditating in a cave for 12 years, they come out to share. The gurus with the students, they come out to share. And every 12 years, they get together in India and they share what they found. Women, men, everything, right? In 1875, one of these very advanced masters looked at this 12-year-old boy and said, he goes, "You're a very old soul." Now, right before he said that, this master with 12 apostles materialized their body right out of the ethers, just moments before this 12-year-old, and they did it in front of this 12-year-old. Well, of course, that kind of power instantly activated his kundalini. You can imagine, right? And so they told him, he says, you're going to write one of the greatest books comparing the Siddha Yoga teachings with the Old Testament. And he wrote this book called The Holy Science. And it's a book I mentioned in my book. And he says, and you're going to be the master of a master who takes yoga to the Western Hemisphere. And of course, we know who that is. Years later, he was the master of Parishya Yogananda that brought yoga to California. And by the way, today's body lies in a glass tomb for over 40 or 50 years with an incorruptible body. Now, that young boy at 12 was Swamiji Sri Yukteswar, who was Yogananda's master. Now, that's just one little thing. That's just one little taste of Kubala Mela. Been going on, Melissa, for 50,000 years.
I am fascinated by the stories of people who have lived to be, you told two stories in your book, somebody who lived to be 189 and somebody who lived to be 250 years old and possibly longer. And it baffles me that we're not taught these things. I feel like in school, that should be a highlighted story that children learn. I'm so excited to homeschool my kid because I'm going to call it the possibility curriculum. And I want to teach based on, like, who cares if my son knows the year of World War II? Given what's happened in the news the last 2 years, how am I supposed to believe anything that's ever happened in history? I'm just going to be honest. But there was this part in your book, too, about something that your master, Bo Yang, taught you in Tibet. And maybe I loved it so much because it tickles my confirmation bias just a little bit. But you talked about there were two teachings, but one of them is that most of the world experiences everything they do, no matter what it is, by looking externally and looking outside of themselves, which you and I touched on a little bit earlier in this interview. But the second thing was observe what the world is doing and do the opposite. Basically, because most people have lost the ability to think for themselves. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Well, that was actually told to me. We have a challenge on our website you've probably seen called the 45-Day Challenge. It's a free challenge, and it came into being because at the end of my first year in Tibet training, which was actually close to the fifth year of my training because I trained with the Lama of 3.5, 4 years in America, in New York. And I was in the dancing arts, Shaking martial arts in Chinatown and dancing off Broadway at the time. And so after he told me to go there, at the end, and now I understand when I was up on there meditating and there was no human beings around for 45 days, then the no talking for a year preparation made a lot of sense, right? Because you got to get okay about talking to yourself, right? And so I'm up on the mountain, and I used to think that the fear of death was the biggest fear. And I learned very quickly, because number one, I had died twice on the operating table in 1968, and I realized that I went to heaven then. For a Christian's point of view, that was a good thing, because I proved that was real. But then on the mountaintop, without dying at all, I went to heaven every day in the 45-Day Challenge. And then I realized you can go to heaven without dying. And that was an interesting thing. And that led me to what the real fear was, and it was living the kind of life that actually Master Rabbi Jesus talked about. And he says, I come to bring you a life more abundantly, which means no strings, no limitations. And I learned that Tai Chi Gong is an inside game. It's an inside journey. And growth comes from you being okay about looking at yourself in the mirror. I do teach this concept called mirror meditation. And mirror meditation reveals everything. It even will reveal what you believe and you don't believe. You want to find out real fast. Take your affirmations, your mantras, your affirmation, and I challenge my people at least one day a week. Speak them audibly to the mirror. watch your facial expressions and watch your eyes. You're going to find out what you really believe. And if you don't believe the words that you're saying, then I ask my students, then why is it coming out of your mouth, right? So 45 days, I'm doing some Tai Chi every day. I'm doing some yoga. Obviously, my meditation's getting deeper and deeper. How deep? I asked the first year I was there, I said, how deep meditation should I get? He says, Little Lama, they used to tease me about being Little Lama way before I even thought about being. That was their nickname for me, Little Lama. He says, when you can hear the blood flow out of your heart, you're at intermediate meditation. And I thought, oh, that's the craziest thing I've ever heard, right? Hear the blood flow on my heart. I trained 5 years, and it was on the 25th day of the 45-day meditation. I was going in, and I was moving through this vortex and through this tunnel, and I thought I'd been teleported to Hawaii, and I was somewhere near the Bonsai Pipeline because I heard the most beautiful waterfall I'd ever heard. A couple minutes into it, I realized that was the blood flowing out of the chambers of my heart, and that was incredible. Now, I thought that was hard, Melissa, but when I went back to New York, 6 months after being in New York, I got a Western Union telegram. And the Western Union telegram said, you know that what you did on the mountaintop? I want you to go to Broadway and 42nd Street every Friday from 1 to 3 in the afternoon. I want you to sit down, and then you'll be an advanced meditator when you can have that same experience with all those people walking around. Does anybody know how busy 42nd Street and Broadway is on a Friday afternoon? People are selling everything. I mean, things you want and things you don't even want to talk about, right? And the noise, it took me 6 months. On the 6 months, one day I got there, and I was just about felt like, oh my God, I'm going to finally disappoint Boyan. I'm going to finally disappoint. And I was there. It was 6 months to the day. And I sat down, and I heard the same racket, the same noise. And then all of a sudden, I was back in that vortex again. And I was going deep, deep inside. And I heard that waterfall again. And I said, oh my God. And then I realized that was the whole point of Tai Chi Gong. That it was easy to do it on the mountain when no human beings, not even a four-legged llama was around, right? Because I had everything ideal. But Tai Chi Gong is not about that. Tai Chi Gong is how you going to do this in everyday life. How you going to bring this peace, give power to peace, which is the same thing Om Shanti means, the same thing Tai Chi Gong means, give power to peace. Because when I walked up and met the guy in physical form, Master Boyan, that I had met out of my body spiritually, he didn't shake my hand, Melissa. He grabbed me on the inside of the forearm, and it was really wild. I watched him, and it was like he neutralized gravity. He just lifted up, and then he walked over to me, he put his arm on me, he pulled me closer. He said, Rasaji, what took you so long? It was like the whole time from that 7-year period, he waiting for me to show up, and I'm going, oh my gosh. I mean, my male ego was completely crushed. I mean, literally, it was just crushed. It was like, oh my God. Yeah. I'm walking down that mountain that 46th day. He looks at me. He says, Little Lama, he says, what bothering you? He said, I know I'm supposed to share this stuff. Who's going to listen to a kid? At that time I was 20 going on 21, right? Who's going to listen to me? Because I figure who's going to walk through my door is going to be at least over 40, right? Who's going to listen to a 21, 22-year-old kid, right? He says, oh, I see the 45 days still hasn't changed your microwave mentality, push a button, pop a pill mentality. Okay, I'll give you a symbol. Look at what the world's doing, Little Lama, and do the opposite. Well, I can't tell you how many times in my life I would hear that. I'd go to Disney World, everybody go to the right, I'd go to the left and get on the rides faster. Every time. But the last 24 months to 36 months, the nonsense that's been on the news media, whether it's the retail news on the TV or all these false prophets on the internet, right? I'm listening to this stuff and it all sounds just a bunch of noise, and it sounds just like the noise at 1 to 3 o'clock at Broadway and 42nd Street. So I contact the Lamasery, and so absolutely 2 years ago, you can go back. I've got 300 or 400 videos now on YouTube, right? You can go back and see it was March of 2020 when the Lamasery says, I want to do something, guys. What can I do? Look at this mess. COVID had just come to the surface, right? What can I do? They said, just keep speaking the truth. Tell them about truth, simplicity, and love. You've been trained as an entertainer. You're not shy in front of the camera. He said, tell them your truth and people will start to listen. And that's what happened. 2 years ago this month, I started telling the story of what's really going on. And I decided to take the other road. We're not going negative, we're going positive. And you want to hear the positive message? Then turn here. You want to hear negative? Go somewhere else, because there's plenty of that. And that's what happened. And it led me here to you. Look at it, 2 years later, here I am.
Meant to be. Well, I love that story. I love that message. I've kind of just been that way most of my life. I'm like, what's everyone else doing? I actually even remember speaking at a conference, and it wasn't about my whole persona that I have where I do the opposite, but it was about even the way I grew my podcast. I was looking at what is everyone else doing? What is everyone else sharing to do? I'm going to do the opposite, and it worked for me. And so thank you for that message. But I love leaving listeners with an action item, something that they can actually practice with themselves throughout the week when they're thinking about what they've learned from this episode. Do you have something that you can guide listeners through that may help?
Yeah, well, I mean, the most basic thing to understand, I'll actually give them too. People will ask me, you got a store online and you sell prayer beads. Why? Well, in chapter 2, I explain about that. The oldest yoga on the planet, over 50,000 years old, is called japa yoga or mantra yoga. And it means the recitation of the garland prayer beads, of which there are 108 beads. And the reason it's 108 beads is because if you're having difficulty mentioning the name of God that you like, well, guess what? The ancient city yogas came up with at least 108 names. Some of them female, some of them male, and some of them without a body. So you might try that. And it's interesting that your Catholic rosary is exactly one half of ancient Indian mala beads. They're 54 beads, as opposed to, it must be a connection there somewhere, right? It must be a pony there somewhere, right? So the key of it, when you take the prayer beads and you say something like, something as simple as, I have plenty of time. People are rushing around today like chickens with their heads cut off. Can you imagine going, I have plenty of time. I have plenty of time. Bead. I have plenty of time. After a while, your spirit, mind, and body says, you have plenty of time. The power in this is that the 5 to 10 minutes it takes to do that, you're the one saying it, and say whatever you want, affirmation, mantra, passage from scripture, because your audible tones were designed to help heal your spirit, your mind, and body. And your system, which Jesus called the temple, which in ancient India they called the chanda. Spirit, mind, and body are one. 3 yellow stripes and 1 magenta dot. Spirit, mind, and body are but one. Jesus referred to that as the temple. So let the temple be healed by your voice. Choose. You could say something. If you're Christian, you could say, greater is thee than is in me that's in the world. What an empowerment, right? Greater is thee that is in me than is in the world. Do it in front of a mirror. Watch how powerful it really is, and you'll see whether you believe it or not. Then the other thing I want them to do is understand the basic premise of breath, because it actually starts in the womb of our mother. See, the last thing to develop, we know, are the lungs, but the lungs are not the pump of the breath. They're the sieve of the breath. The pump is the belly. Why do we know that? Because not only through the umbilical cord are we getting nutrition, but we're also getting oxygen. And when you hold a baby, and by the way, I've held my 3 sons in my hands. I cut all their cords. I'm a very present father, very proud of it. And I noticed exactly what we teach. You touch that infant just being born, it's like the Pillsbury Doughboy commercials. You can stick your finger into them to the second knuckle because there's no tension in their body, especially if they didn't have a traumatic birth. If they had a cesarean or they were breached, possibly they could have tension. But the only tension, Melissa, around an infant when they're born is 2 inches around the umbilical cord in the navel, because that was contract. It was doing this the whole time. Contract, expand, contract. So that's the root of where our breathing is. Actually, we have a psychic umbilical cord 2 inches above the navel, which is, if a pregnant woman turns sideways, it's exactly the peak of where her belly is. Exactly the peak. And that's not by accident. We know that, right? So I want to inhale through my nose and fill my tummy up like I'm pregnant, and then exhale out my mouth. And then I want to inhale through my nose and expand my tummy, and then exhale out my mouth. And again. And you want to start off with about 5 or 10 breaths, and in a week or two, go to about 10 or 20. And what will happen, you're not only breathing oxygen, you're starting to breathe qi. You're breathing energy, the qi in Tai Chi Gong. That will change everything, because with that qi comes a higher form of intelligence that the brain and the body's not used to. And the moment you get that intelligent, when it's done correctly, it is a biological experience of the divine. And I've got breathing exercises all throughout that you can tap on Rasaji.com. So everything's at Rasaji.com. Circle of Life.
Well, thank you so much for co-creating with me and bringing all of your wisdom to this podcast. So for listeners that are really resonating with you, where's the best place for them to connect?
Well, first of all, like you said, they can get my book just joining our free email list, and they can get the Daily Lama that we put in the email, which is a 15, 20-minute a day message. But if they really say, I'm ready to roll up the sleeve and I'm ready to go through transformation, this is all we're asking, Give us your email, click on Join 45-Day Challenge, totally free. Yeah, it's going to take 20 to 40 minutes a day of your time. It's a little bit of reading. It's 4 or 5 Qigong exercises. You won't even break a sweat, and you're going to love it. But I also ask people to kind of say what I did. Say no to the negative input for those 45 days too. Tell the family, if you've got one, everybody's got one or two in the family that feels like, they're a news broadcaster and you never get the news, so they need to send you the news even when you don't want to listen to the news. They're the ones that text you and you click on, oh my God, this is what I'm trying. So just tell them you're going on a sabbatical with the Lama. You're going to have fun. We're going to play together, and you're going to learn some energy things, and you're going to read some positive material. And then by doing that contrast, saying no to the negative and saying yes to positive I want them then to start reading some of the testimonies, which are also free on the site, because it's not the Lama saying this. There's husbands, wives, daughters, grandmothers, grandfathers that are having spiritual impact, that are having physical. People are raising their energy. They're getting jobs. They're starting careers. there's hundreds of testimonies on there now. So just take your time. You need a little motivation. Read 5 or 10 of them and ask yourself, do I want some of that? That's that simple. It's been a pleasure to be with you, and you have a lot of courage to do what you're doing, and my hat goes off to you and your spiritual journey. That takes a lot of courage to go down the pathway that's not easily traveled, and I understand that. I've been doing that since the 60s. I'm right with you, and it's been a pleasure to be with you. We'll have to do this again sometime.
All the links for this episode are at mindlove.com/x76. So your challenge for this week is to just be really mindful of your thoughts. Notice when a thought is negative. And I think sometimes we let thoughts slip by that aren't super negative. And what I mean by that is we just tell ourselves that, as Master Rasaji talked about, that we don't have enough time, or we're so busy, or something always happens to us, or we're unlucky. Sometimes it's these more subtle thoughts that end up completely narrating our lives, which creates our reality. So be mindful, maybe one thing at a time. Which is the thing that tends to stress you out the most? Is it that you're always so busy, or there's always something to do? Can you flip that with, my life is so rich, I always have something to do? Or, I've consciously created a life with a lot going on because that's exactly how I like it. The way we speak to ourselves creates our reality. And the way we speak to ourselves originates in the way we think about ourselves and our lives. So how can you consciously change your reality by first starting with your thoughts? And of course, let me know how it goes. Leave a comment right on the show notes page at mindlove.com/x76, or reach out to me on Instagram at mindlovemelissa. If you'd like to support the show, the best way to do that is by joining MindLove Premium at mindlove.com/premium, where you get the entire backlog of exclusive episodes, plus meditations and other bonuses. You can also support one of MindLove's many amazing sponsors. For a list of all of these, go to mindlove.com/sponsors. And the freest way to support the show is by sharing it either directly with a friend, or screenshot it and tag MindLove Melissa and MindLove Podcast, or leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And that's all for today. So thanks for giving your mind a little love today, and I'll see you next week.